Hello, I'm Tom Martin, and welcome to another episode of A San Francisco Conservative, the new podcast series featuring yours truly, Tom Martin. I'm a lifelong journalist. I've worked for Diane Sawyer at ABC News, Charles Krault at CBS News, spent some time at CNN, and so on. I love expanding my knowledge, having the chance to ask thought-provoking questions, and that's what we do here. And I'm honored to be joined by my co-host and the man of the hour, David Parker, who is author of two amazing books, Income and Wealth and A San Francisco Conservative. Welcome, David. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. And I'm excited about this episode. You're a great writer, as anyone who's read your books knows. And if you haven't read David's books, what are you waiting for? Get to it. But no, David, you're a great writer, and I'm very excited about the essay that you sent me most recently, titled The Four Laws of Economics. And I want to get into all of that. I'm a student. I'm a lifelong student, never stopped learning. Maybe you can relate to that a little bit.
As a lifelong teacher, I can relate to that. Yeah.
I guess that's why we get along so well.
Yeah.
So maybe you could sort of set the stage for this again, because I remember, you were a public school teacher there in San Francisco for 40 plus years, teaching music to young students and shaping, several generations of lives. And then you went back to school yourself. How is it that you were inspired to go back to school, some years later?
I realized because while I was a teacher, I was doing some investing in real estate, and that I had some intuition for that. And that I realized also that I had some intuition for economics, just as a pure subject, and money. I just had some intuition for it. In fact, I went back to school. I got enrolled in the law school in San Francisco, and I couldn't get off the introduction. I thought it was so interesting. Theories of law. I said, and since I didn't really want to be a lawyer, just going back to school a little bit, why don't I study theories of money and economics? Because I know something about that. So I walked out of the class after a few lessons of contracts and went to Golden Gate University in San Francisco and studied economics. And then I went into a graduate class, since I have a graduate of a master's degree in music already. So I figured, well, I'll start off in the master's in economics. I couldn't do that work. It was really difficult. I went back to economics 1, and I realized it was math. Oh my God. So I started taking algebra classes again and calculus classes. I just got so hooked, I couldn't stop. It took 67 units straight through math and economics, every class that school had to offer. And one reason I just went back to school is because I was starting to write on economics and on money. And my wife took one look at it and says, I think you better take a class in economics. Okay, that was it. That was the final straw. And then after taking the 67 units and continuing to work to this day, 3 to 5 hours a day, I read and write on all fields. And now I'm ready to write. So I started to write. Now I can't stop.
Well, we're glad you can't stop. And what's the perspective that when you sit down to write, you want to do something a little different? You're not writing an economics textbook or something. We have so many of those. You're doing something very different.
It's my it is like my entrepreneurial mind that kicks in when I'm reading economics. And so I just finished writing, and I sent to you the 4 laws of economics without looking at a textbook, except to verify afterward, make sure what I said was correct.
Exactly. And it's on, and let me tell the readers, because this is an audio and a visual medium. It's all of that, the 4 essential laws of economics on 5 pages of paper.
Right. Here's what the economics professors are almost not saying. They're inadvertently saying what you're supposed to say, but then they have to get off on a mathematics explanation, and they don't bring historical reference. I always throw things back to 4, 5, 6,000 years ago and say, this is how it was. And it's no different than today. That's one of my main things. And then when I give examples, I give examples from business as much as from history. So when I'm on air as a San Francisco conservative, I'm really talking as a classical conservative or a classical liberal. I'm not talking as a member of the Republican Party, which in fact I'm not. And I'm a member of the ACLU. I'm a real San Francisco conservative. I don't like when people talk without knowing what they're talking about. So that's why I'm here.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Well, why don't we jump right in? Like I said, I'm a perpetual student, and it sounds like today is my lucky day.
Yeah.
So, what's law number one?
Well, law number one is arbitrarily, I'm calling it law number one, is comparative advantage. The nation shouldn't produce everything, even if they can produce everything better than the other nations. It's not important. That's called absolute advantage. When I have a person comes once every 2 weeks and cleans my house, I could do it better than that person can. But that's not, but my time is worth more than spending a whole day cleaning a house. I can pay her, and my housekeeper cannot go and write on political economy from an advanced level. So she doesn't have an advantage, but I do. So that's a real simplified version. But Solon, Solon, in 6th century Athens, 100 years before the famous 5th century Athens, he was a wise merchant and philosopher. And somebody wise in Athens, some board of government, says, Solon, straighten up our economy here, because we think there's something happening in this country here and it's not happening. And he says, he didn't use the words, but that's what he said. Athens, stop our excellent farmers, don't farm anymore. The soil in Athens isn't that good. Stop it. Just do almost just 2 things, or plant some olive trees. Anybody can plant olive trees. You take a branch and cut it, throw it in the soil, it grows. No skill involved. Fill up the country with olive trees. Get the oil, put them in your beautifully painted vases that no other country around here can do like you, and then use your great shipping abilities, which Athens has to this day. They're still leaders in the world in shipping, and ship that stuff everywhere. That's all you're doing from now on. You're making olive oil, you're painting vases, and you're shipping it everywhere. Nothing else. And you trade for everything else that you need, because that's your comparative advantage. That skill is worth $10 an hour. Farming, I'm just making up a number, is worth $1 an hour. Don't be farming for $1 an hour. Don't be cleaning your own house. Do that where you can make $10 an hour. And Athens got really rich, and then really rich, and then it's somehow they had time to think, and they began to think. That's almost the basis of all this. Is Solon got that country shaped up, and everything we have, everything you see around you today has its roots in 5th century Athens. Almost every idea, every institution, every library, every form of government, everything has its basis there. In mathematics, we're still reading Euclid. Here's geometry. That's exactly the book that is being used today. Theater, literature, philosophy. Nobody has beaten Aristotle. Nobody comes close to him. So, but he freed up that thing, and the idea of Western civilization burst onto the scene, that the government can't walk over you. The rights of the individual precede those of the community. So comparative advantage, that's number one in my thing there.
Okay, great. Well, let me just throw in real quick. Again, if you're joining us midstream, this is an episode of the San Francisco Conservative. That's the title my friend David Parker has applied to himself. And as I appreciate the explanation, not to have any misconceptions about what that means to be a San Francisco conservative. So that is interesting, the law of comparative advantage. I would love to hear, how that applies to our nation today. When
yes, that's
farming.
Very good.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
like,
So
I spoke so long, I stopped speaking, but that was going to be my next thing. Very good.
Okay.
So when a populist president runs for office and says, I'm going to put up tariffs and we're going to stop foreign goods from coming in this country and we're going to protect jobs. Well, any politician can win an office by saying that we're protecting American jobs. It's exactly the opposite of what you should be doing. You should let all American jobs just crumble, because America has a comparative advantage in high technology, higher advantage than China, in fact. China's forcing that onto their people. They have so many people, they finally get people to do it, but they're waiting for us to invent something, and then they go steal it as soon as they can. They're not inventing. So that's a sign of encouragement that that China is not going to overtake the US. They're not breeding wild inventors and wild entrepreneurial people who don't even know what the law is or don't care what the law is. You can't compete. They can't compete with us. Anybody opens their mouth there, boom, they're thrown in prison. So we shouldn't be protecting jobs. If they're fading, it's because we no longer have the comparative advantage in that field. We shouldn't be making shoes.
Yeah.
Italy can do that better than we can, and China can do it cheaper.
Well, what about farming? You use that example of farming, you know, in Athens and so on. What, you know, now in this country, I mean, for decades now, right? Many farmers are paid not to grow their crops, and
oh, that's complete political perversion. Yeah, that's completely wrong. You have farmers here sitting there smoking their pipes, collecting 100 grand a year. Don't. That's just to keep farm prices up. That's not the job of government to be directing the economy as if they're a magician or somebody. You can't. That's not for the government to do. Not for the government to do.
And tell us again about the distinction between the society or the community overall and the individual. What if an individual chooses a profession that's does not offer that comparative advantage?
If he does it knowingly, that's fine. If someone in Athens says, I love farming, I don't care how much money I'm making, I'm farming. Nobody says you're not to farm, but that's not your. And in this country, we have a comparative advantage in technology, but the US Department of Labor Statistics, I just looked it up, says 6% of this nation is qualified to work in that field. So we have a long way to go. Everybody in America should be working in technology. Drop whatever you're doing. The nation will get 5 times richer overnight, will certainly overtake China and everybody else. And another statistic from U.S. Department of Education, I'm not sure where it came from. No, San Jose Mercury News, that says 70% of the employees in Silicon Valley, Bay Area, where all the high technology is kind of centered, are foreign born. America does not produce students and qualified personnel. The U.S. Department of Education, I'm talking to you this because I just looked this up to verify it all, says 36% of the nation is proficient in reading and math.
Oh, wow, that's
all schools, not just public schools.
Yeah, that's terrible.
So we have to have open immigration. We need immigrants, and we need our educational system is not good enough, and then we're not producing what we should be producing is high tech people who know science and engineering and math. There's thousands of jobs available in Silicon Valley, thousands, and they can't fill them. Can't fill them.
Wow.
Their search is global. We're not looking locally. Can't find them local.
Wow. Wow. Well, let's talk about tariffs a little bit. I'm not sure if both political parties, but certainly I hear about that from the Democrats as far as, China being a competitor. So let's quote unquote level the playing field through tariffs, but that's artificial, right?
Sometimes for a short period of time, you can have a tariff against a particular country to let them know that they should stop their tariffs. You stop your tariffs, we'll stop our tariffs. So if we're losing jobs unnecessarily because we're sloppy or we're taking my theories too seriously, it would be the counter argument. Like even Trump had some merit to what you're saying. With NAFTA, we're throwing all these jobs away to other countries who don't respect environmental standards and who don't respect construction and quality standards, and we're just throwing them away. There's some truth to that. But then you just put a tariff against a country who's doing that, and they'll get the message real quick because they won't be selling us anything anymore. You drop it, we'll drop it, because it's in everybody's interest. The standard of living in the Middle East in the 6th and 5th century BC rose for all the countries who were trading with Athens. Everybody's standard of living went up. That's the lesson. Trade according to a comparative, not absolute advantage. Athens could probably do everything better than all the countries around, but then they wouldn't have time to paint their pottery. They wouldn't have time to ship. they'd be doing everything else. You can't do everything.
And the impact of Athens, as you said in your essay, it has been felt in so many aspects of our lives today, right?
That's a miraculous century. And in this, I'm disappointed the schools don't teach that where does American and British democracy come from? And and culture. Everything around you, every library, every theater, every discussion of literature, and every discussion on science. I remember Carl Sagan was disappointed when the Alexandrian library was burnt down, which was 3 or 4 centuries after, or AD. And because the Greeks, they become arrogant and they weren't talking to the population, and the population didn't like that. Arrogance is that was a good lesson to learn there. You can't be that way. But they were working on atoms, breaking down atoms, and they were working on flight, all these drawings. He says, because our investigation of space was retarded 1,000 years because they burnt that library down and they stopped really serious education at that level.
Wow.
The Athens library was in Alexandria, and they stopped every single ship coming into Alexandria from all over the world, not to steal, but they borrowed every single book that was on that ship, wrote it down, and gave them back to their books. So they had a library of everything that was known at the time.
Wow.
So 1,000 years of aeronautics was canceled until Leonardo da Vinci in the Renaissance. We started thinking about flight again. And it took 500 years till now to go to space.
Yeah.
We lost 1,000 years.
Wow.
So
amazing. Well, this is really fascinating. I can't wait till our next episode to hear about economic law number 2. This is it's really fascinating. So thank you, David. And I just want to remind our viewers to be sure to pick up copies of David's books, Income and Wealth and a San Francisco Conservative. You can do that by visiting his website, which is davidparkeressays.com, or you can go right to Amazon. So thanks very much. Look forward to the next time.
yeah, can't wait. Thank you.